Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
You and I are going to talk today about what just happened in the NFL. People that consider that a victory, it is the hollowest and shallowest and most meaningless of all victories. We'll do that in a little bit. Right now, though, let me ask you this. When you were a kid, when you went to school, did you have a dress code at that school? Was that a thing for you? When I was a child, I found out when I was about 6 years old that my family was going to pick up and we were going to move to England, where my father was from and where his work took him. And that was devastating in a lot of different ways. I had to leave my dog behind. I had to leave my baseball team behind. I had to miss out on Halloween. I arrived in England when Halloween was still thought of as a pagan festival. And I remember we moved in the fall. So it was just long enough into the school year to where everybody else had made friends, and I was like the new kid that nobody was all that interested in talking to. And I was like, well, at least I've got all that free candy to look forward to. October 31st is coming fast. I'm just going to eat myself into a sugar coma and feel as though my parents' ill-informed life decision was the right move. What do you mean they don't trick or treat here? Oh, it was devastating. It was horrible. It was awful. At that time, Halloween, like I said, viewed as a bit more of a pagan festival, and it was sinister and macabre, and it wasn't about free candy. It was about druids hanging around Stonehenge and casting spells and stuff. So yeah, and right as I got to be old enough to stop trick-or-treating, that's when the English folks cottoned on to the glories of free candy, and trick-or-treating became more of a thing. It was rough in many ways, but there was one way in which it was vaguely merciful. See, I'd heard that in England, kids had to wear school uniforms, and I was so not into it. I'd seen pictures of what English boys had to wear to school. Short pants and a tie and a jacket. It was the most ridiculous getup I've ever seen. And to this day, I would remember seeing kids, English kids, on their way to school wearing shorts. It would be freezing cold outside, but that was a uniform. Until you hit a certain age, you weren't even allowed to wear long pants. And I don't know if I developed my rugged punk rock individualism and my FU attitude that would get me into trouble later on as a child and continually as an adult at the age of 6. But I do remember looking at these kids in the short pants walking to school and thinking, that looks miserable. You could never get me in one of those stupid get-ups. Like, A, you look dumb. B, shorts in this kind of weather? What the hell are they thinking? This must sort of violate some sort of human rights situation. Anyways, I was grateful. I was grateful that I didn't have to wear a uniform when I went to my school, because my school that I went to in England wasn't an English school. It was sort of like, it was packed with fish out of water international kids. And as such, they sort of adhered to more of an American style curriculum, which did not involve school uniforms. I remember there was one terrifying moment where they were like thinking of getting school uniforms, and then they decided against it. But there were certain constraints. You just couldn't show up doing whatever the hell you wanted to, wearing whatever the hell you wanted to. There was a little bit of rebellion there. I remember as kids, we would wear the t-shirts with the band slogans that were offensive on them underneath our hoodies. Like, I got my Rage Against the Machine shirt, my FU, I won't do what you tell me shirt, and would be like, hey guys, check this out, see what's going on. Oh no, hold on, the principal's coming, you can't see my shirt. Okay, now he's gone, check this out. Yeah. Also had one of those Metallica shirts. Do you remember these? Oh, they're so great. They're so great. The Metallica shirts with a toilet and a hand with a knife coming out of the toilet and said, metal up your ass. Those were the things that we wore under our hoodies and our jean jackets as well. And we'd be like, any teachers around? No? Check out my t-shirt. It was awesome. But there were a couple of sort of sartorial constraints that we had to adhere to as kids. And one of those things was you couldn't have like super long hair or super ridiculous punk rock hair or a mohawk or something like that if you were attending this particular school. And it became a point of interest for me that I was going to grow my hair a little bit. I just got tired of cutting it. I thought it looked cool long. And, well, when 7th or 8th grade or 6th grade or whatever it was rolled around, I started growing it out. I went from never being noticed by the administration there to being on their naughty list really freaking quick. And I actually had my first sort of real run-in with authority over the length of my hair. Had they known about all the graffiti I was doing in my spare time, I think they would have had other concerns. But yes, I was hauled into the principal's office more than once about the length of my hair, and how that situation shook out changed my stance on authority forever.
Real radio.
104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So I'm a kid, I'm in the middle school, and I'm going to school in England. Moved there in like the 2nd, 3rd grade, right around that time. And as I grow up, I develop a bit of a sense of rugged individualism. And I decided that part of my rugged individualism, and this is probably about the 5th or 6th grade, is that I'm going to grow my hair a little bit. I think cutting my hair is stupid. I hated getting haircuts. I never liked the haircuts that I got. My father was like, your mother gives the best haircuts. I'm like, no, she really doesn't give the best haircuts. How can she make it look so much like there's a bowl involved when there's no bowl involved? I don't get it. And, you know, the bowl cut looks cute on a kid. You got no problem having a bowl cut when you're young. But when you start to, well, when the changes start happening to your body and you start being aware that other kids look cool and there's like gel and style involved, your mom's haircut isn't going to cut it. So I even went to a barber. I'm like, Mom, sorry, this isn't going to work for me. No offense, but I'm going to go get a haircut somewhere else. And she was like, okay, you realize I'm taking you there and I have to pay for it. So you saying you're going to do it doesn't really work because, you know, you're 10, but fine. We'll go get you another haircut. And I got a freaking horrible haircut from some barber that butchered me. I think my mom had a quiet talk with him. I'm like, okay, so what we really like to go for is a bowl. And anyways, I was not happy with my mom's haircuts. I was not happy with the haircut that I'd gotten in the real world. And I decided a good way around that would be grow it out. You know, I'm not going to get haircuts. It'll be cool. I'll be sort of like a little rocker dude. That was my idea. That's what I thought. I thought it would be cool to look more like some of the guys in bands that I liked. The guys in Pearl Jam all had really long hair. I would go with that. But my school was not okay with this in any way, shape, or form. My school kind of had a policy that wasn't that strict when it came to dress codes, but it did say things like you can't have ridiculous punk rock hair or you can't have really long hair. And you got to kind of be, you know, you can't be a total freaking slob. I mean, it was jeans and sneakers for the entirety of school, but they drew the line somewhere. And when my hair started getting a little long, they drew the line at me. And I got hauled into the principal's office like 2-3 times. And I remember arguing. I remember going, you know, I really think it should be about the person on the inside. And my principal going, that was an argument people used on me in the 60s. I was like, you don't look that old. And well, that wasn't the move. That didn't help my case at all. And I remember coming home one day and talking to my dad. And he's like, here's the thing. You're going to have to get a haircut. I was like, what do you mean I'm going to have to get a haircut? You're a lawyer. Come on, lawyer this situation up. Argue for me. Argue for my case. He's like, okay, why don't you want to get a haircut? I was like, because I don't want them to say that I've got to do something, that I've just got to do it. I'm not willing to relinquish that choice, that freedom. I don't want to be his little bitch. And my father was like, A, where on earth did you get that expression? B, pick a matter of principle. Like, this is just about the rules. And here's the thing. Much as you might be a young, rugged individualist that's determined to bail on school as soon as possible and start playing drums in some band and go around the world, right now, that's not the situation, and you're going to have to get a haircut. So I went. I got a haircut. And They butchered me, and I hated it. And it was miserable, and all my friends made fun of me. I walked into school. They're like, looks like you lost the battle. Too bad, Suzette. I'm sorry. You thought you were different. You thought you were special. You were going to buck authority. You were going to fight the system. You were going to fight the powers that be. I had the soundtrack to every single Spike Lee movie playing in my head at the same time while I blasted Public Enemy and did graffiti on the weekends, and I still couldn't... I still couldn't get away with having long hair. So I got a stupid haircut, and it was a miserable experience, and I hated the whole thing, and I realized that I'd kowtowed to authority, and that made it sting that much more. And then I noticed something. I noticed that there were a couple other kids that, well, they didn't have long hair, but there were a couple of Middle Eastern kids at my school, and they had mustaches. There were, I still probably couldn't grow a mustache to this day, but there were kids in my school that had mustaches. And I asked one of them, I was like, dude, I've spent a lot of time with the school handbook recently trying to figure out where the line is with my hair. Like, does it say anywhere, like a specific length? How much can I get away with? And one of the things that I've read very clearly over and over again is that there can be no facial hair. Guys weren't allowed to grow beards and mustaches. And he was like, oh, yeah, but I mean, my parents just made a really big donation, so that's cool. And this guy was like, I don't know what the hell his deal was. I think he'd escaped from the Middle East, and he had fabulously wealthy parents. And the fact that he had Cartier watches, and the fact that he wore Ralph Lauren polo shirts to rugby practice sort of tipped us off to the fact that he was perhaps occupying a different financial stratosphere than the rest of us. But yeah, he was like, oh yeah, no, my parents just kind of made a donation, so I get to keep the mustache. I was like, A, your parents like forked over cash so you could keep your mustache, and B, that's how it works? Because I was under this impression that the rules were for everyone, and if it said it in the handbook, well, it applied to me and it applied to this guy. And he was like, well, yeah, my parents thought it was worth it. In my culture, it's sort of, a sign of being a man, so it's important to us. And for that reason, they thought it was worth making a donation. So I kind of get to do what the hell I want with respect to that. I was like, your parents bought you a mustache. That's a different type of entitlement that I'm not necessarily familiar with, but more power to you and more power to them. Now, I've got to sort of go and examine how the rules are different when money is so clearly and visibly involved. And, well, this is why I say, if you're under the impression that what happened with the NFL this week is in any way, shape, or form any kind of a victory, not so much. We'll get into exactly why next, but I think you see where I'm going with this, don't you? Join the conversation. Tweet me at ADSXE.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radioland. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
Give it up, yeah. Give it up, yeah. Bring this on, come on.
School days. You think about it more when you see kids graduating. Like right around this time of year, you see all those graduation photos being taken. Kids sweating through their unnecessarily formal clothing in the outdoors. Kids going to their senior prom, sweating through their dresses, sweating through their suits, looking uncomfortable yet excited about the prospect of real life, which is just about to kick off. I don't know if you did that whole thing, but it does kind of make you look back and consider some of the stuff that you learned in school. Now, here's the thing. I'm incredibly grateful for my education. Did I use the reading, writing, and arithmetic? Well, I mean, certain parts of it, absolutely yes. Certain parts of it, in no way, shape, or form. Quadratic equations have factored into my life, not even a little bit, since the last day of school. There's certain things that were absolutely a waste of my time, bearing in mind what I wound up doing with my life. But you know what? I'm incredibly grateful for my education because I actually went to a school where education was a priority. Learning was a priority. enrichment of a kid was a priority. And not only that, I really lucked out because I had a couple of really awesome, cool, great, inspiring teachers that made me feel like anything was possible. And when I look back on folks like my AP English teacher, Mr. Daniels, and how he gave me the 1A+ he gave to any student, and he made me feel as though perhaps I should be doing something with my voice. As I look back on it, as I look back on the limited amount of time Mr. Daniels had to get into my young mind, and I look back on the fact that I can vaguely pay rent and buy food and clothe myself with the money I make from my voice and talking and things of that nature, I honestly feel like he should get a cut of that action. I think the most important thing about an education, or at least in my respect, and I think for so many people, is that an education is more than just getting grades, more than just getting grades good enough to get into a good college, more than just going to that college and getting a degree so that you can get a baller job. An education is a sense of possibility. An education is something that, when done right, can give you the sense that whatever life throws at you, you can handle it. An education is an idea that there's more out there than you have experienced, and you should possibly go off and experience some of it, because there is freedom out there. Education equals a sense of freedom, equals a sense of personal peace, equals less of the things that bring us down, less desperation, less weakness, less crime, less fighting. If you have the self-reliance that comes from the knowledge that you have a good education, and that's opening up doors for you, you become a significantly less desperate individual, and you make your way in the world in a much kinder and better way, in my opinion. That's the case with me, I think, and that's the case with a lot of people I've seen. While I do prize the idea of education, and while I do believe it to be a cure-all for so much of what ails not only America, but also the world, I gotta tell you, there were certain parts of going to school that were, of course, absolutely ridiculous, as was my experience with being forced to get a haircut so I adhered to school dress codes, and as is pointed out by the great John Mulaney.
The program to teach us about the violent world waiting for us outside the school gym. And that program was called Street Smarts. Time for Street Smarts with Detective J.J. Bittenbinder. Shut up, you're all gonna die. Street Smarts. That was the general tone. He would give us tips to deal with crime. I will share some of the tips with you this evening. Okay, tip number 1, Street Smarts. Let's say a guy pulls a knife on you to mug you, because you remember the scourge of muggings when you were in 2nd and 3rd grade. You know how a mugger thinks, man, I need cash for drugs right now. Hey, maybe that 8-year-old with the damn Aladdin wallet that only has blank photo laminate pages in it will be able to help. Let's say a guy pulls a knife on you to mug you. What do? You go fumbling for your wallet. Well, in that split second, that's when he's gonna stab you. So here's what you do. You kids get yourselves a money clip, okay? You can get these at any haberdashery. You put a $50 bill in the money clip. Then, when a guy flashes a blade, you go, you want my money? Go get it. Then you run the other direction. And our teachers were like, write that down. Like, buy a money clip? Engraved, ? You go home to your parents, hey, Dad, can I have a silver money clip with a $50 bill in it, please? Don't worry, I'm only going to chuck it into the gutter and run away at the first sign of trouble.
Like I said, there were certain aspects of school that were absolutely ridiculous. And, well, one of those aspects was the dress code that I was forced to adhere to. I mean, I don't know if it's all that silly, but when I discovered the hypocrisy behind it, I was shocked and dismayed. What happened was this. To summarize, I had long hair, thought it made me cool as a kid. My principal said, no, not so much. You look like a slob. You're not allowed to have that. You're going to have to get it cut. I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. Absolutely not. And the situation escalated, and I rebelled, as one does at that age. And finally, it came down to my father saying, you got to go get a haircut or you're going to get suspended. And I was dismayed. I was shocked. I was annoyed. I was hurt. I felt like I'd been beaten by the world because, the battle of me and the school administration had become a bit of a talking point around school. And when it became very clear vis-a-vis my stupid haircut that I had lost the battle, well, it wasn't a good feeling. And then I realized something. There was this Middle Eastern kid, Tony, which wasn't his real name, but we all called him that. And he was a super cool guy, super nice. But Tony occupied a different financial stratosphere than the rest of us. Tony's family don't know exactly who they were or where they were from or what they did, but they were evidently loaded, as was evidenced by the fact that the kid's first car was something that the vast majority of us will never attain in our lifetime, as was evidenced by the fact that he wore Cartier watches and showed up to rugby practice in Ralph Lauren polo shirts. So he had a different thing going, and one of the different things he had going was a big bristling mustache. He had quite the impressive soup strainer. And I was like, hold on a second. I was just told, in no uncertain terms, that I wasn't allowed to have hair of a certain length because it violated school dress codes. You, on the other hand, and I know this because I've been going through the school handbook rigorously, looking for a way to fight this thing. You, on the other hand, have prominent, noticeable facial hair. I mean, the kid must have had a berserk pituitary gland because he was able to grow this thing from the age of about 12. But it was also technically very clearly stated to be not allowed in the school handbook. I'm like, how is this possible? How are you allowed to have this and I'm not allowed to have that? And he was like, oh man, my parents just kind of made a big donation, so they don't really get on me about it. And they understand that it's part of my culture. I was like, your parents made a donation? They bought you a mustache? And he was like, well, when you put it that way, it makes me sound spoiled. I was like, all right, but what way would you put it? He was like, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a sign of being a man to have a mustache in my culture. And well, because of that, and because of the donation my parents made, they turned a blind eye. And I didn't hold that against him. I was like, hey, the world is an unfair place, but I guess it's, going to shake out in your favor every once in a while in an unfair way. And that was his time to shine. But I remember thinking, oh, I just got hauled in on a matter of principle, a matter of the rules, a matter of a very black and white definition of what was allowed and what was not allowed. And I thought, at least I was just like, it says in the rule book, there's no way to fight this thing. Oh, well. I was a rebellious kid, and I wanted to think that I beat the system whenever possible. But in this case, I was like, well, the rules are the rules. My dad says the rules are the rules, and the school says the rules are the rules. And then they said they were going to suspend me if I didn't get a haircut. So I got this stupid haircut. But then when I found out that there was a different set of rules, depending on how much you were available to grease the financial wheels of the school system, I was more than a little dismayed. And it was my first insight into the idea that maybe the rules didn't necessarily always apply. And when you saw somebody bending the rules, or when you saw somebody being morally ambivalent about certain things, dollars to donuts, that there were dollars involved. Follow the money. If anything ever puzzles you, and this is a good blanket rule for the entirety of the universe. If ever you feel like a strange decision is made, if ever you feel like something doesn't quite add up, and it could be at home, it could be at school, it could be at work, it could be anywhere. It could be in government, it could be in business. But if ever you feel like things don't make sense, if you hunt around a little bit and you make an effort to follow the money, then you, my friend, will have a pretty clear idea 9 times out of 10 why things are happening the way they are. So I was, like I said, educated via a school rule book and a lousy haircut as to the effect money could have on the rules. And if you think that money doesn't factor into it, when the NFL made the decision that they made about the national anthem and kneeling during it, well, then you are sorely mistaken. I mean, in case you missed it, the NFL owners have officially banned players from kneeling during the national anthem. There's a new rule. Yeah, a new rule that says players have to stand and show respect for the flag. So raising a fist or linking arms could also constitute a violation. Now, you and I have talked about this a bit in the past. What do I think of kneeling during the national anthem? Would never do it. Would never do it. For 2 important reasons. Reason number 1, There's some veterans that I wouldn't want to offend. I wouldn't want them to take it personally. I wouldn't want them to feel I wasn't observing their service, that I had slighted their contribution, that I didn't have the utmost and greatest of respect for them and everything that they've done and everything that they've sacrificed and everything that their families have sacrificed. So on the off chance that a veteran could take it the wrong way and think it was a personal attack on them and their service, it wouldn't be worth it to me to kneel if I was a football player. Now, the other thing that would contribute to me not kneeling if I was a football player was the fact that, well, quite frankly, it didn't seem to do a whole lot of good. If it made people go, oh, look, they're kneeling, well, perhaps we should examine our actions and the actions of this country and the actions of society. They make an interesting point. Let's discuss this a little bit. That would have been great. But that's not what happened. This is 2018. People get bent out of shape super quick. And so a couple football players knelt, and all of a sudden, the entire world went, there is no racism. These entitled idiots are disrespecting our flag. What the hell, man? What the hell? We hate them. We hate them so much, jerks. And I was like, well, that didn't really foster a spirit of understanding and reconciliation. That didn't bring us closer to being divided factions that have become united and are now dialoguing in a meaningful way. No, it didn't work, and that's probably why I wouldn't do it. When I have a disagreement with someone, I don't want to scream and yell at them. I don't want to get into an argument with them, because I've never once been in an argument that resulted in the other person saying, gee, you're right, I see it your way now. Sorry. That never happens. People just get more entrenched. People get more dug in. People get more resolute in their beliefs and more cut off from the idea of hearing anybody else's perspective, and more divided. So for those two reasons, I would not have taken part in the kneeling if I was a football player. I don't know how you feel about it, but as much as I support people's right to protest, as is their freedom that has been given to them by the government of America, our Constitution, and the people that fight for that freedom. For those two reasons, not wanting to offend any veterans, not wanting to make them feel slighted, or not wanting to make them feel like I think they don't matter, and for the fact that I don't think it was working, I wouldn't be doing that. The NFL have officially banned players from kneeling during the national anthem after tremendous amounts of speculation and expectation being placed on them to either allow their players to express themselves as is their right as Americans, or say, hey, you will respect the flag, this is America's national pastime, and if you don't do it, you're out. They opted for the latter. The new rule says players have to stand and show respect for the flag. Stand and show respect for the flag. And in using those terms, the NFL have done a fair amount of virtue signaling. Now, I don't know where you come down on this argument. I would never, as we said before, kneel during the national anthem. But if you are somebody who is looking at this, jumping up and down, considering this to be a massive moral victory and the right thing to do, I'm here to tell you now that nothing has been won, nothing has been solved, and nothing was achieved by doing this. If you're counting this as a victory, I got to tell you, it's of the extraordinarily hollow and meaningless variety, and we'll get into exactly why next.
Sometimes you just know you're done. You're longing for that shining sun. You walk these streets most every day. You're waiting to get washed away. Radio.
Now, more AD on the radio.
Back once again, the ill behavior, delivering and giving you my musical savior. Back once again, it's your boy AD, and can't nobody rock a body better than me. Back once again, the ill behavior, delivering and giving you a musical savior. Back once again, it's your boy AD, and can't nobody rock a body better than me.
So people all over America right now are hopping up and down celebrating the NFL's decision to ban kneeling during the national anthem, referring to it as a victory, a moral victory. I believe Vice President Pence just in his response to this tweeted the hashtag winning. And Look, I get the idea. I get the idea of having gotten one over. But let's be real here. What's this about? Well, let's go over the rules exactly. And then let's follow the money. The NFL owners have officially banned players from kneeling during the national anthem. The new rule says players have to stand and show respect for the flag. Nice bit of virtue signaling there, showing respect for the flag. So raising a fist or linking arms could also constitute a violation. If any player or team employee doesn't stand, the team will be fined at the league's discretion. Individual teams can also impose their own penalties or fines on their personnel. Now, the league was pretty vague with all this. There weren't specifics. There's a lot of gray. The league didn't say how much the fine would be, nor did they get specific about how respect for the flag, quote unquote, would be defined. Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, said that the vote was unanimous among owners, although San Francisco 49ers owner Jed York said that he abstained. So there's some dissent there already. Players do have an out. You don't have to be on the field for the anthem. And by the way, this whole idea of the anthem, that's sort of a post 9/11 thing. And you understand where it comes from, but it's not like you're breaking tradition with the entirety of the history of football if you don't come out during the national anthem. That's a fairly recent development. So players have an out. They don't have to be on the field for the anthem. They can stay in the locker room without being penalized by the league. Of course, many players probably don't see that as a compromise, since the whole point of protesting is to be seen protesting. But then again, the TV networks will most likely point out who's not on the field, because let's face it, some people care more about the drama of what other people are doing rather than respecting the moment themselves. And so you know what that means. Maybe this new policy will somehow turn into a positive thing for everyone, but chances are it's just going to make the national anthem a spectacle of controversy once again, just as the whole hysteria was starting to die down. And the NFL, all of a sudden deciding to grow a conscience. Bear in mind, this is an organization that was only too happy to fine players for wearing a shred of pink during Breast Cancer Awareness Month to honor their dead mothers. They did that lickety-freaking split. And you wonder where this comes from, because there was all this brouhaha last season where the NFL talked about the right that players had to protest and how it was, an American thing, and in some ways American as the national anthem and all of the above. They didn't know they were caught between a rock and a hard place. They had people screaming and yelling, saying, do what Trump told them to do. Tell them they're kicked out if they don't stand during the national anthem. That's it. You're done. That guy's fired. He's out of here. And then they had people going, hey, at what point did we become a totalitarian dictatorship? We thought this was America. Don't you dare take away their right to express themselves. And, well, they kind of tried to play the middle ground there for a second. They tried to please everyone. And then the ratings came in. Like I said, if ever rules make you a little puzzled, follow the money. That concept that I was introduced to when my friend Tony was allowed to keep his mustache and I had to get a haircut, and I found out that his parents had made a massive donation to the school for something or other. I was like, oh, it's really about money. Rules can be bent and rewritten if you have a solid enough checkbook. And the whole thing with the anthem and standing or kneeling, boy, did that hit Roger Goodell where it hurts. And that was in his ability to write big checks. Ratings down. People disgusted with the NFL. I mean, here's the thing. They didn't have a stellar track record to begin with. Like I said, when I found out that they would fine players for wearing even the tiniest shred of pink during Breast Cancer Awareness Month to honor their dead mothers, that they would fine people for that, I wasn't thrilled with the organization as a whole. When I found out that they hadn't paid taxes for a very, very, very long time, I wasn't thrilled with the organization as a whole. And the idea that they suddenly grew a conscience and cared about the rights of players or cared about respect to the flag was absolute garbage. It came down to money. You follow the money and you'll get an answer 9 times out of 10. And in this case, it was very clear. So to people that think this is a moral victory, no, it's not. This is once again turning the national anthem, our national anthem, into a spectacle of controversy, right when the whole thing started to die down. This is forcing somebody to do something. And guess what? You can't force patriotism. You can't force respect for a flag or an anthem or any of the above. These are feelings that people own. And no matter how much the person that cuts your paycheck tells you you will have respect, if you don't have that respect, you're not going to have that respect. You can force somebody to stand, but you can't control their thoughts. And in doing so, in a manner that was, let's be real here, 100 million% financially motivated, that had nothing to do with the flag, respect, or patriotism. In doing this, all you've succeeded in doing is widening the divide. All you've succeeded in doing is making people angrier. All you've succeeded in doing is making a bunch of people feel as though because you have money, you get to take away someone's voice. And guess what? You never really get to do that. So, I understand they had to do something. Is it too little too late? Maybe. Who knows? Who cares? I really don't care about the NFL. I don't care about their ability to make money. None of the above keeps me up at night. But what I do care about is the idea that has been perpetuated in America that by forcing somebody to do something your way, we are moving forward. Because we are in no way, shape, or form moving forward when this happens. We are moving backwards. And, well, we took a big step back this week.
Leave the stimulation to the professionals.
Everyone is so smart.
KPRC, more stimulating talk radio.
There's something happening here, and you should know what it is. The dumbing up of America. Now, more AD on the radio.
So the world is not as smart as we wish it would be. A woman in Charleston, South Carolina was recently throwing a graduation party for her son and ordered a cake from a grocery store. Her son had done very well in school and she wanted the cake to recognize that. However, the bakery wouldn't put the words she wanted on the cake because they thought it was profanity and it was obscene. What exactly were the controversial cake words that weren't allowed to recognize her son's academic brilliance? We'll get into this a little later on. Right now, though, it is the summer concert season. And there's all these incredible lineups that are hitting the road together. And it makes you think. It makes you think a little bit about which bands you'd like to see on the same bill. Like, what's your dream lineup? Mark Pitta had a very interesting observation about bands being on the road together based solely on their names.
I think rock groups should just tour together based on their names. You know, so we have double bills like Talking Heads with Simple Minds. REM and ELO. And guess who? Who? You two? Yes. Meatloaf and Bread together again. Rat Poison. Styx with Stones. Very good. All right. In fact, give me a name of a group. I'll try to match it up. Any rock group. Madonna with Supertramp. Keep going. Grateful Dead with Suicidal Tendencies. Just groups, no names. AC/DC with Boy George. Police with Quiet Riot. What? Prince with Queen. The Sugar Cubes with the Honey Drippers. Oh, man. I never got that. Led Zeppelin with B-52s. It worked. I don't have to be here. My favorites are Fine Young Cannibals and Missing Persons. Sex Pistols and Wham. And Climax with the Pretenders. So...
Unbelievably brilliant. Well played. You and I will talk about the word that was disallowed from the graduation cake a little later on in the show after we take a look at the events of today. Let's find out what's going on in the news. So, I don't know if you caught it or not, but the folks over at CBS have a little bit of celebration to do. CBS is apparently the most watched network for the 10th straight year. Right. Well, give me an O, give me an L. Yeah, the shows that are on CBS appear to your grandparents. And let's be real here. CBS is probably the most watched network for the 10th straight year because their viewers are so old they can't figure out the remote to change a channel. Or CBS viewers are so old that they still watch television. Like, when was the last time you did that? When was the last time you went, ooh, my show's on. It's 8:30. Let's drop what I'm doing now and go watch TV. In this on-demand world that we inhabit, it's very strange how TV falls further and further by the wayside. And in some ways, it's sort of sad. Like, you look at the massive networks. I guess there was a time when there was only like 3 or 4 of them. You and I don't remember it, but there was a time, and that meant that when you were on TV, like you were a Johnny Carson or any kind of talk show host, you had an audience of 50 million people because there was nothing else on to watch and nothing else to do. Now, when you think about it, you don't even have to leave the house to be wildly entertained. You don't need anything other than a phone to be completely engrossed and occupied. You could play Words with friends. You could meet people for naked activities on your phone through some sort of sketchy dating or hookup app. You could watch whatever television show or sports event that you want to watch on your phone. You could just sit there watching YouTube videos. It used to be that to be entertained was quite a thing. And that meant that you had to make a plan, meet some other people, go out, see those people, deal with those other people, which, let's be real here, is the worst. But you wanted to be out. You wanted to be out and about and doing things. But that took an awful lot of effort. So when you didn't feel like going through the effort and the expense of time to go out and be entertained, your only other option was one of the 3 or 4 network television shows that happened to be on at the time. And as a consequence, tons of people watched them. Now people don't have to go out. You don't have to go out to see a band, which is very sad in one way or another because it's harder for bands to get noticed in this day and age. But it also means that if a band does stick around, if they manage to draw people to their shows live, they're competing with so many other things that they're probably going to be very, very good. So in some ways, it's up the standards. People have to work harder to get you to part with that entertainment dollar or just to get you to leave the couch. But because people can be entertained so completely and utterly without leaving the couch on their phone, and there's a million different forms of entertainment screaming for your attention at all times, the idea of a TV network still existing and still being relevant is such a weird and outdated concept. Like CBS being the most watched television network for the 10th straight year is almost like, bravo, you're at the top of your remedial reading class. We'll see how that plays out. Tanya Harding, I don't know if you caught this or not, Tanya Harding is reportedly furious that she lost Dancing with the Stars to Adam Rippon. Now, here's the thing. Is it Rippon? I don't know. But shows like Dancing with the Stars, shows with live climactic finales where people are voting in real time and things of that nature, singing competitions, dancing competitions, all those sorts of things, they remain one of the few real draws on TV, only because that's one of those things where, you can't DVR the baseball game. You can't watch it on demand and avoid the outcome of it. There's no getting around that. It used to be like, I taped the Mets game, nobody tell me what the score was. I'm going to watch it when I get home. And you could still have that be a surprise. Now, if you have any kind of a digital device, there is no keeping that secret from yourself anymore. So those are some of the few shows people watch. Shows that play out live and in real time with, like I said, big climactic finales. And Dancing with the Stars, I guess, is one of those shows. I've never seen it, but I know the premise it operates under. And, well, yeah, like I said, Tanya Harding is reportedly furious that she lost Dancing with the Stars to Adam Rippon. Well, fortunately for Adam, there's definitely no precedent for Tanya Harding doing anything irrational when she feels slighted. That should go well. Ari and Lauren from The Bachelor, another such TV show that is lasting because of the live and real-time aspect to it, say their wedding will not be televised. Right. Probably because they know that when the priest asks if anyone objects, everyone's going to object. Netflix has picked up a new animated series from The Simpsons creator Matt Groening. Yes. The Simpsons creator Matt Groening has a new animated series for Netflix, which means that in about 10 or so years, Netflix will pick up an identical animated series from Seth MacFarlane. I think this might be headed for Netflix too. Did you watch Captain Kangaroo growing up? Was that a thing for you? I was a little too young. I think he kind of bailed on it by the time I was watching TV. But for a lot of people, Captain Kangaroo was this beloved guy. I actually had, oh man, it was such a good record. Such a good record. I had one of my parents' old records. I got an old record player and their old supply of records when I was a kid. And one of the records that I listened to religiously was the Captain Kangaroo Tells the Just So Stories album. Did you ever hear this? It's brilliant. If you've got a kid, please find a way to get it from. I think you can. I bought it digitally because I wanted to listen to it again, and because, well, my sister's having a kid, and I wanted to make sure that she was able to give it to her kid at some point. So I went out and bought the digital version of it because my sister and I both grew up on it. But it's basically Captain Kangaroo retelling, as sort of audio plays, Rudyard Kipling's Just So stories, and it's awesome. So that was really my point of contact for Captain Kangaroo. And like I said, if you haven't had a chance to check that out, I know it would have probably been a lot more exciting when you were 5, but still, it's definitely worth owning, especially if you have a child in your life. But yeah, Captain Kangaroo was this beloved guy, and, well, Mark Wahlberg, yes, Marky Mark of the Funky Bunch, the increasingly buff Mark Wahlberg, is rebooting Captain Kangaroo. Yeah, the show, I believe, will teach kids the importance of science and technology and engineering and math and flexing. Lots of flexing. The artist SZA, S-Z-A. SZA has been pulled off of her tour due to swollen vocal cords. Also, I would imagine a shortage of vowels. Justin Theroux revealed he has a giant rat tattooed on his back. Wow. That's interesting. I wonder what made him want to get a likeness of Tristan Thompson committed to his body. Happy birthday to the legendary Tommy Chong. Yes, Tommy Chong, 80 years old. Boy, time sure does fly when every time you try and look at a clock, it melts off the wall. Amazing that he's still kicking. Good for him. Kim Kardashian took her kids to Disneyland this past week just gone by. Kanye didn't go. Because, going to Disneyland is a choice. I believe there was one embarrassing moment when Kim went on the spinning teacup ride, and workers then spent about an hour trying to pry her posterior from the teacup, but it all worked out in the end. A recent study finds that, this is interesting. A recent study finds that Taylor Swift fans are more likely to oppose gay marriage. Yeah, study finds that Taylor Swift fans are more likely to oppose gay marriage. And in a related story, Nickelback fans, they're more likely to oppose, good music. A federal judge ruled yesterday that President Trump cannot block other users on Twitter because it violates the First Amendment. So if you're one of those folks that gets incredible amounts of joy out of trolling President Trump on Twitter, well, you get to keep doing that. He'll have to keep looking at it, and he's looking at it. There's a very good chance that he might see what you're doing because he's not allowed to block people on Twitter because it violates the First Amendment. Wow, what strange digital times we are living in. You can still block President Trump, though. Insiders say that President Trump likes doing stuff to freak out the media. Oh, really? He does? There is an aspect of his presidency that's a bit like that. I mean, he's so sort of hell-bent on taking down news organizations that don't have nice things to say about him that I could understand how he likes to troll them a little bit himself. So remember, when World War III eventually does break out, it's because our president wanted to make Wolf Blitzer's eyes bulge out a little bit. President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, finally received security clearance. Remember, this is a whole big thing. Kushner doesn't have security clearance. Should he have security clearance? Is it necessary? Is it nepotism? What's the deal? Well, President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, finally received security clearance more than a year after becoming Trump's advisor. Yeah, probably not necessary. Turns out that Donald Trump's top secret security code was just password 123. Go figure. All right. So, like I said, the world is not very smart. A woman named Kara Kosinski from Charleston, South Carolina, was recently throwing a graduation party for her son Jacob, and he'd done rather well. She wanted to honor that academic achievement with baked goods, so she ordered a cake from Publix grocery store, and her son was graduating, like I said, he'd done well, summa cum laude. And she wanted the cake to say, "Congrats, Jacob, summa cum laude, class of 2018. Except that the Publix website wouldn't let her put that on a cake because they thought it was profanity. Yeah, they confused the middle word in summa cum laude with, well, you know. Kara put a message in the special instructions part of the form explaining what the term really means, and even sent a link to a website explaining the Latin definition of summa cum laude, but it didn't matter. When she got the cake, it said summa ... laude. And then she had to explain to everyone at the party why it was censored. And she says that her son was humiliated. Publix apologized and offered to pay for the cake. So there you go. Like I said, people not so bright. You, on the other hand, are a glittering example of wit and intelligence, and I'm so glad that you decided to join me. Thank you so much for hanging out.